fintech companies solving questions around cross-border payments? Our next guest says not really. Here's a tweet from Boaz Sobrado. He's a London-based fintech analyst. He said there's a widespread belief amongst financial commentators that the problem of international payments has been solved by fintechs. And then he says, let me show you how this isn't true. We're going to bring him in now. Boaz Sobrado joins us from London to discuss further. Boaz, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's take a look at it. Another tweet in your thread where you talk about being a Costa Rican national living in London. You want to make a larger purchase in Costa Rica. You want to send multiples of foreign currencies to a US dollar account in Costa Rica. Attempt one, use a couple fintechs directly to the beneficiary's bank account. The cost is just 0.7% of the transaction. And then at the bottom there, the problem, the beneficiary's bank will freeze the funds for anti-money laundering reasons until a provision of documents have come forward. And this adds substantial costs and hassle. Are you sure this is enough of a disincentive to use fintechs for cross-border payments when the costs are pretty much less than using banks and wire transfers?
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me on. The issue here is that getting those documents, involves a trip to the embassy, which is very often the capital of the country that you might be very far away from that. You have to pay the embassy fees, all sorts of things. These are hidden costs that people who live in countries like Costa Rica or from countries like Costa Rica or any other place in the world which is not, doesn't belong to the so-called first world, is the problem that they have to face.
All right, now let's look at another issue that you brought up in your Twitter thread, which was actually trending, was pretty popular. Let's take a look at another one. You actually said here, another attempt, send the funds via a couple other fintechs to a US dollar account of you, the sender, that's in Costa Rica, and then transfer the money locally. However, the companies do not allow transfers from to a US dollar account in Costa Rica within themselves. How do we get around this scenario? Should fintechs allow for more interoperability between themselves? Kind of like how, APIs work.
Yeah, I think there's two problems here. So on one hand, you have the technical issue, right? You have the technical issue of how can a bank in London talk to a bank in Costa Rica that talk to another bank in Costa Rica? Or, even something more complicated, like what if I wanted to send money to a country like Nigeria from Costa Rica? Like, how do we get a bank from Costa Rica to talk to a bank, probably somewhere in Europe to talk to a bank in Nigeria to get this transfer to work? Now, that is a technical problem, and it's not an easy problem. But I feel like companies like Wise have actually done quite a lot to achieve this, to solve this problem. The real issue, however, is you have the whole compliance and anti-money laundering and KYC, AML stuff on the other hand, which is a much more difficult problem. So here, the problem is Wise doesn't allow me to transfer money to my own Costa Rican bank account because it doesn't meet some AML or KYC or some standard that someone drew up somewhere based on the spreadsheet. Now, this highlights the issue of the huge cost that these AML practices have. This is not like some small bank no one's ever heard of. This is a market leader in the area. And for some reason, it's being excluded, right? And the whole, shebang of AML regulations comes at a huge cost, So the UN estimates that less than 1% of all criminal transactions ever get recovered, right? So it means that less than 1% efficiency for AML regulation. And globally, we spend roughly $180 billion on AML compliance, plus the financial cost of something like me not being able to do a legitimate transaction, right? So we receive roughly $1 billion to $2 billion worldwide in terms of criminal funds that we catch thanks to AML laws, but it costs us $200 billion or more. I think that system doesn't really work.
All right, fair enough. So do the regulators have to ease some of these checks? And can they ease some of these checks when safety is a priority, even though, as you said, only 1% of those funds are recovered? Can the regulators play a role here?
Exactly, 100%. I think there's a very, very big role for regulators to play, precisely because for safety reasons, right? If you have a safety system that only catches 1% of the bad guys, then really it's not working, and you're spending a lot on it. It's extremely expensive. And the costs I cited earlier, they're just the compliance costs for financial institutions, hiring lawyers, hiring people in those teams. We're not even talking about the huge global cost that it is for people, for instance, within Africa, cross-border transfers are extremely difficult. Who's done the analysis on how difficult it is to move money from one country in Africa to the neighboring country in Africa, how much that costs the economy? So precisely because it's imperative for safety that money can't be laundered like this, we need to reassess what we're doing. Instead of doing more of the same, we need to figure out, okay, what is the new approach for stopping money laundering that isn't this expensive, doesn't hurt the good guys at the expense, and actually doesn't stop the bad guys.
I've seen some of your tweets where you've expressed some views on cryptocurrencies. Can cryptocurrencies solve cross-border payment issues?
I think they can, actually. I think for a lot of use cases, not all of them, for a lot of use cases, they have proven that where the regulator's not doing their job properly and where local financial institutions are underdeveloped or technically not proficient, etc., it's very much the case that very often the cheapest thing for the consumer to do is to do cross-border transactions via cryptocurrencies. I think they have a huge role to play here. And already in countries like Venezuela and like Cuba, you see that the actual FX rate, the actual unofficial FX rate that everyone uses to calculate how much the local currency is worth, is already determined in part by these B2B cross-border cryptocurrency transactions. So I think absolutely, yes, it has a huge role to play.
All right, but I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts. What do you make of the fall in cryptocurrency value so far this year? They seem to be tracking equities. When equities are going up, crypto is going up. When equities are falling, and we're talking cross-border payments. This is supposed to be fiat and currencies. Yet they're acting like securities. So what do you make of the fall in value so far this year?
I think that's a very good point. So I'd like to bring up 2 points to this. So first of all, cryptocurrencies are absolutely behaving like equities. They're behaving like risk assets. That is definitely true. However, for cross-border payments, there's 2 things that you need to be aware of. First of all, you need to look at the rise in stablecoin volumes. Stablecoins are designed to be pegged to a normal currency, for usually the US dollar. So the amount, there's over $100 billion worth stablecoins right now in the crypto ecosystem. These can be used in cross-border transfers without much risk of fluctuation. The second part is, and as someone that has used cryptocurrencies for cross-border transactions very often, you will find that the fluctuation of cryptocurrencies doesn't really matter that much in the space of 1 or 2 hours, right? Because when you buy the cryptocurrency in one country and you transfer it to a different country, then you sell it, you're not actually exposed to the price fluctuation for that long. So it's a quite useful tool for cross-border transactions, nevertheless.
Great conversation. Really appreciate your time. Boaz Sobrado, Fintech Analyst in London. Thank you so much for talking to us about cross-border payments. We appreciate your time.